we should get a move on, Sion whispered into Sistroya's ear. We'll have time to enjoy each other's fragrant presence once we're out of this hole. I think my nose has gone numb from smelling myself all these years. Sion chuckled and gave her a firm final squeeze. Lucky you. Releasing him from her embrace was not unlike letting water flow through your fingers on a desert. And just like the greedy desert sand would drink up the life-giving water, so would their mission take away Sion so soon after he was out of her arms. It was year 244. 3 whole years remained until the timeline would begin to write fresh history and cement itself as the truth. Déjà vu. It could cross their minds to spend this time living, existing, but each passing day was a risk they couldn't afford to take. Accidents happened, life was too unpredictable, and sometimes even the hand of fate could not be enough. They knew exactly what their plan was from the moment they walked through the prison wall to when they would cross the border back to Memn. The limited knowledge of time travel, based so heavily on legends, myths, and Professor's final lesson, it made them believe that the person casting the spell had to have been the source of it. It made sense. But it wasn't true. Agares' death confirmed it. And there was just one other reasonable conclusion. The source was the hot stone they had found on the portal's pillar. An artifact of sorts, which carried the power of the spell, and had to be what was keeping it stable. Listening to the chatter of the prison guards over the years, Sistrea had learned that the scorching and enslaving of the borderlands had still taken place, though not under Agares' command, but Raye Aurora himself. Using the mage's knowledge, Raye figured out a way to bring the plan to fruition regardless. Paradoxically, it could be a good thing. The stone was the center of the scorch. Perhaps it was placed back at the portal. Perhaps not. They certainly wouldn't risk such an assumption, but their plan easily accounted for that part. All they needed was a soil thermometer, a tool as common in Dardena as a walking stick. In the winter, they had tracked the scorch by looking at the snow resting on the upper parts of the trees, but with the thermometer they didn't need to wait for the change of seasons. Once they arrived at the scorched area, they began to measure the heat levels of the soil and moved towards the warmth. In different circumstances, it could almost be taken for a game. Just as in the previous timeline, the epicenter of the scorch was empty and abandoned. Supply traders riding in and out of Dardena only visited the towns. Guards had no reason to come here either. The soil led Sistroya and Sion deeper into the forest, and soon they stumbled upon a place they recognized. It used to be a thorny thicket that children of Memn turned into a test of bravery, where they challenged each other to pass through and reach the building inside. The structure of black marble had always been shrouded in mystery. In the past, 3 of the walls had served as a memorial carrying the names of soldiers fallen in the Aurora raids. In this reality, the names were fewer. The battlefields moved further up north, and nobody carved the names of slaves who quietly stopped breathing in the ditches by the Carnine fields. But what was inside the building? No one knew. The door had been sealed with some kind of magical device. People of Memn had decided to keep it a secret from foreign scholars, who were certain to swarm in and find a way to crack the seal the second they knew about it. Mages were usually reasonable people, and whoever had locked the place must have had a good reason to keep it shut. A deadly plague, or a horrid result of some failed experiment, were much more likely than forgotten treasures. And of course, It would be the Memnians who'd have to deal with the aftermath once the scholars promptly excused themselves upon discovering one horror or another. But no worries of hidden terrors, no fantasies of magical treasure, no drunken tales of restless spooks came even close to the truth of what lay inside the strange mausoleum. The seal was inactive now, the door unlocked. Sestroya slid her fingers across the surface, covered in Actarial lettering. The delicate glow that used to fill the words when a shadow was cast upon them was absent. And this, the very center of the thicket, was where the ground was the hottest. The rock must be inside. Sion joined Sestroya at the door and also inspected the familiar seal. Do you think it's what used to be locked inside all this time? Given the power it holds, I'm nearly certain of that. Sestroya turned around, closed her eyes, and leaned against the door for a moment. We are right beside Mem, she said quietly. Yet I haven't even thought about it until this moment. Sion was silent. Have you? No, he replied. They'd been focused on each other, on the world around them, on the task ahead, and the life they were leaving behind. In Dardena. They didn't think of the real world, but of the world that felt real. Sion was the one who found the strength to push onwards. He stepped up to Sestroya and raised her face to lay a kiss on her lips. We must go, he said, and took her hand, entwining their fingers. A small eternity passed before Sestroya managed to clutch his hand back and move to follow him. Beyond the door, the air was hot like on a summer noon. Her eyes went dry in seconds. Lips began to cry for the soothing gliding of wet tongue. It was in here, there was no doubt, the source of the scourge and the source of the time-twisting spell. Yet there were still things uncertain. Perhaps they would fail to find a way to destroy the rock, capable of setting stones on fire. Perhaps it was harder than any gem capable of harboring magical energy. Perhaps it would withstand a bullet's salve and leave them with a mystery they'd fail to solve before the time ran out. Perhaps. Or perhaps it would shatter in an instant and take this reality with it. Perhaps. The stairway wound down. Ses and Sion walked carefully, barely able to see the steps in the fading light coming from the outside. But before they descended into complete darkness, a delicate, warm light entered the stairway. Few more steps, and they entered the grand chamber. And the mystery of the black marble building became unveiled. Yes, no one had ever guessed what was truly hidden behind the sealed door. Because what turned out to be true should simply not be possible.